What's up, everyone? It's Sam Dunn back on BangerTV for the first time in a really long time, coming to you from my desk. Got all my things, got my Lemmy bobblehead, all my knickknacks. It's been a year since I reviewed a release which has something to do with today's release, but I'm not going to get into it. Bullet belt. What have I been up to? Things have been busy at Banger. Late last year, we released our show about a guy named Geddy Lee from Rush on Paramount Plus, which was a lot of fun for me to make as a bass player. And little tidbit, I got to actually play the famous Jaco Pastorius bass of Doom. It was an otherworldly experience.
Yeah, it's a religious experience.
A lot. Other than that, our new show on A&E just launched about rock legends as part of the legendary A&E series biography. And lastly, we made a really special film called Any Other Way about the remarkable musician, artist, performer, person, Jackie Shane. Super proud of that one here at Banger. But I'm here with you now to talk about a very exceptional release for me in the metal world. It's Cavalera and the re-record of Schizophrenia. Cavalera, Schizophrenia was released on June 21st through Nuclear Blast Records. And I'm not going to dive into the deep history of Sepultura, Cavalera conspiracy, or any of it, but this is the basic backstory on this album for those who do not know. The original Schizophrenia was released in 1987, released in Brazil on Cogumelo Records and internationally through Roadrunner. This album, you could say, was the transition album from Sepultura's Morbid Visions and their earlier EP, Bestial Devastation, which were much more primitive, much more Black Death vibes, metal, into a much more thrash-oriented, much more complex, much more ambitious sound than their earlier records. So let's go back to the original Schizophrenia, released in 1987. I was all of 13 years old, but I think I heard it for the first time a few years later. And you know, I remember loving the album at that time, but like a lot of complex, dense, extreme metal albums of that time, it didn't have a lot of definition in the production. So you sort of spent a lot of time like listening really closely for what is actually going on in the music. I liked it more than Morbid Visions because, again, it was a bit more ambitious, much more musically interesting. But I gotta say, I never liked it nearly as much as the following album, Beneath the Remains, which for many people is a top Sepultura album because it's really when they hit that sound of that more melodic death thrash, but with much better definition in the production. But now we jump forward to 2024 and the re-record of Schizophrenia by Cavalera, of course, name referring to brothers Max and Igor Cavalera, the heart of Sepultura for many, although realizing that's a bit of a controversial statement. But anyway, put that to the side. You remember last year I reviewed Morbid Visions and Bestial Devastation and really being completely blown away by how they brought that album to life. Morbid Visions and Bestial Devastation in their original form were really, really primitive. And I just thought that the re-record was actually beyond my expectations of how to take an old sounding record, make it sound new, but without losing the original spirit and attitude behind the initial release. Okay, enough about the deep past and the recent past. Let's get to the album in question. So, first impressions, fucking yes. The riffs are so much more crisp, more well-defined, and this album was always one that had a lot of ideas packed in, a lot of riffs moving from one to another, a lot of breaks in the music, guitar breaks, a lot of dynamic changes, and I gotta say, it's an even more enjoyable listen now in 2024 to this re-record than the original. So there's the crispness in the riffs, but I'll try to not spend the rest of the review talking specifically about the guitar work of Andreas Kisser, but here goes nothing. So Andreas joined the band for this album, and in my opinion, he is the main reason why this album is such a giant leap forward in terms of the musicality of Sepultura. And with this new re-record, it's like Andreas's ideas and technique and approach just kind of come way out front. So the melodic guitar work is way clearer in this mix. The lead work is much clearer. And of course, all those acoustic passages just gives the album that much more breadth than the previous work. So I gotta say, there's some real standout tracks for me, especially because you can just hear what's going on so much better in the music. That double hit in the early part of the record of Escape to the Void and Inquisition Symphony, for me, it's just literally, I've had a hard time not listening to this record on repeat. There's guitar harmonies in Rest in Pain that I didn't even know were fucking there on the original. Also, the timing has got a little tighter on this re-record than the original release. You know, the bass is present, which is kind of cool. If you get, you know, some good bass response, noise canceling headphones on there, you get a bit of rumble, a bit more definition in the low end, which for this low ender is very satisfying. And there's a bonus track, Nightmares of Delirium. Solid track, can kind of understand why it was left off the original. Maybe not quite as impactful as the rest of the tunes, but nice to have something new to add to the mix. All right, so criticisms, you know, I try not to just make stuff up. I do try to think of this. There's not a lot to bring to the table here, but here goes a couple of thoughts. I gotta say, Morbid Visions re-record was so impactful for me because the re-record was such an improvement in the right way from the original. With Schizophrenia, I feel like they actually maybe could have nudged up the modern vibe just a little bit more, because again, Schizophrenia had a little bit of a production that was better than Morbid Visions in the original form, if that makes sense. So the margin of the modernization could have been a little bit wider for me. They could have pushed it, giving it a bit more crispness, perhaps a bit more of a contemporary sound, but hey, it's pretty damn sweet. And the only other minor criticism I would level at this one, the vocals are cool because they've got that, again, that primitive kind of very cave-like sound. I felt they were a little bit low. Maybe they could have been nudged up again and given a bit more punch to match the rest of the record, but hey, yeah, I'm reaching. What can I say apart from those two sort of, semi-fabricated criticisms? I was thoroughly impressed with this album, and I think I'm impressed with it not only because of the way the production was handled, but really because it brings to light how good of a record Schizophrenia was and is. And I think that with this new sound, it's a much, 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 much closer second to Beneath the Remains as my favorite Sepultura album of all time. So there you go. Can I go over 5? Can I give it 5 1/4? Is that allowed? I'm going for it. It's 5 1/4 skulls on BangerTV.